You know, it's kind of wild how many everyday items we rely on are built from chemicals most of us have probably never even heard of.
Absolutely. Things like your phone case, car parts, maybe even some medicines.
They all start somewhere, right?
Mm,
These foundational chemicals.
exactly. These aren't usually the final product themselves, but essential chemical intermediates compounds that are critical building blocks for creating so many things around us.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're pulling back the curtain on one specific group of these, well, unsung chemical workhorses, cresols.
hmm And our guide for this deep dive is a recent market research report from Cognitive Market Research. It takes a hard look at the global Cresols market right now in 2025, and then projects where it's headed out to 2033.
So our mission is pretty straightforward. We're going to unpack this report, figure out the key numbers. How big is this market? How fast is it growing?
And crucially, where this growth is happening and why.
Yeah, what are cresols actually used for, beyond just being intermediates? And importantly, what are the big forces, the drivers and challenges shaping its future?
Okay, let's get into it.
So before we jump into the market figures, what exactly are these cresols? The report gives us the basics.
Right. At their core, they're described as aromatic organic compounds. You can think of them as chemical cousins to phenol, basically.
Okay.
And the source explains they can be made synthetically, often derived from things like coal tar or petroleum.
And they don't just come in one flavor, do they?
No, that's a key point. They exist in three distinct isomeric forms: orthocresol, meta-cresol, and para-cresol.
Right.
And as the report really emphasizes, their main role across industries is being used as chemical intermediates. They're the necessary ingredient to make something else down the line.
Which then shows up in a surprisingly wide range of everyday things, it sounds like.
Exactly. The report lists common end-use categories like resins, disinfectants, various agrochemicals, think pesticides, medicines, and antioxidants too.
So yeah, much more integrated into the economy than you might initially think.
Definitely.
All right, let's talk numbers then. What's the global snapshot? What does the report say for this market in 2025?
Okay, looking at the data from the report for this year, the global Cresols market size stands at USD 826.27 million.
Okay, so a significant multi-million-dollar market already, just under a billion. And where does the report project it's going by 2033?
By 2033, it's forecast to grow to USD 1148.32 million. So crossing that billion-dollar mark.
And the compound annual growth rate, the CAGR, that gets us there between 2025 and 2033 is
It's 4.2%.
4.2%. Okay.
So the main takeaway from these numbers is pretty clear. This is a substantial global market, and the report predicts it will see steady, fairly consistent growth over the next decade or so.
Yeah, not explosive, but solid growth. It's not flatlining anytime soon.
Not at all.
So that's the global picture, projected to cross $1 billion. But where is all this activity concentrated? And maybe more importantly, where's the real growth engine? The regional breakdown in the report is quite interesting.
It really is. Yeah. So in 2025, North America currently holds the largest market share. Over 40% of the global revenue, actually,
Wow, okay.
coming in at USD 239.62 million.
Floored by Europe, I assume.
Right, Europe is next with over 30% share, valued at USD 198.30 million in 2025.
And then APAC, Asia Pacific, it has around 23% share, but interestingly, the report shows a slightly larger market size in dollar terms than Europe this year. USD 305.72 million.
That's right. There's a slight difference there in how the percentages round versus the dollar values reported.
Ah, okay. And this is where the future picture really starts to shift, isn't it? The growth rates.
Absolutely. While North America and Europe are currently larger in market size today, their projected growth rates are, well, more modest.
How modest?
North America's CAGR from 2025 to 2033 is projected at 2.7%, and Europe's is 3.1%.
Okay, but APAC. The report highlights APAC as the clear, fastest growing region, right?
Yes, by a significant margin. Its CAGR is forecast at 5.9%.
Wow.
And the report specifically links this rapid expansion to, accelerating industrialization and urbanization across the region, plus strong growth in key sectors like pharmaceuticals, healthcare, agrochemicals, polymers, and electronics.
Especially in countries like China, India, Japan.
Exactly. That dynamic growth is really pulling the global market forward.
And we also see pretty solid growth predicted in other developing regions, too.
That's right. The Middle East is projected at a 4.7% CAGR. South America at 4.5%, and Africa at 3.9%.
Interesting. So while North America and Europe might hold the current size lead, the momentum of the growth story is clearly shifting towards these other regions, especially APAC.
Definitely. That's the key trend in the regional dynamics.
The report even gives us some specific country examples that kind of help illustrate these bigger trends.
Yeah, they do. For instance, if you drill down into North America, the U.S. market size in 2025 was about USD 189 million. And the source points out this demand is largely driven by things like specialty chemicals and high-performance polymers used in its electronics and pharmaceutical industries. That reflects a more, let's say, mature, high-value industrial base.
Right. And over in Europe?
Well, Germany shows a market size of around USD 39 million, with demand focused on stabilizers and resins needed in automotive and technical plastics.
Okay.
The UK market, at about USD 33 million, highlights the use of Cresols in adhesives and coatings, again for automotive but also aerospace applications. So you see how mature market demand ties closely to specific manufacturing sectors.
And contrasting that with APAC, China's market was already substantial, right?
Yeah, USD 128.4 million in 2025.
Yeah.
The report attributes its size and ongoing growth to, well, rapid modernization and its huge agrochemical output.
But India, didn't the report flag India's growth rate specifically?
It did. It gives India the highest listed country-level CAGR at a striking 7.8%.
Wow, 7.8%.
Yeah. That really tells you about the explosive need for chemical intermediates there, driven by its booming agriculture and pharmaceutical sectors.
Okay. What about South America?
Down there, Brazil's market at around USD 13.4 million is notable. The report highlights its use in fungicides and pesticides for their huge agricultural industry. Makes sense. Argentina, smaller at about USD 5.3 million, reflects demand for coatings and polymers in automotive and construction.
And the Middle East and Africa had some specifics too.
Yes, the Middle East, while smaller overall, has specific drivers. Qatar, market size about USD 2.6 million, sees Cresols used in industrial maintenance and oil and gas lubricants. And interestingly, Turkey, also around USD 2.6 million, shows a specific need for high-purity Cresols linked to its growing consumer goods and electronics production. That purity point is interesting.
We'll come back to that.
And Africa. Finally, in Africa, Nigeria's market, about USD 1.5 million, is connected by the report to growth in hygiene and personal care, boosting demand for Cresol-based antiseptics and disinfectants.
So what these country examples really show you is how the specific industrial and economic focus of each place translates directly into demand for these particular chemical building blocks.
Exactly. It's not just one single global market. It's really a collection of regional markets driven by different local factors and needs.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and look at the market from the inside out. How do the different types of Cresols stack up? And what about the major application areas?
Okay, on the product side, as we mentioned earlier, there are those three isomers: para-cresol, meta-cresol, and ortho-cresol.
Which one dominates the market share, according to the report?
That would be para-cresol. It holds the largest share.
And why is that?
Well, the reason for its dominance is really its sheer versatility. The report details its wide-ranging use in things like agrochemicals, personal care products, medicines, and antioxidants.
Okay.
It's also essential for synthesizing key products like vitamin E, various perfumes, and important UV stabilizers used in rubber and plastics. So that broad utility makes it the leader.
Got it. And which of the three is showing the fastest growth? Is there a rising star?
Yes, that would be meta-cresol. The report points to its vital role in rapidly expanding sectors like polymers, agrochemicals, and pharmaceuticals.
Oh.
It's a key component in industrial resins, certain insecticides, and it also contributes to vitamin E synthesis, like para-cresol. But the source specifically calls out its growing use in high-performance coatings and antioxidants within the electronics and chemical industries as a major driver for its faster growth rate.
Interesting. So meta-cresol is tapping into some particularly high-growth application areas.
Exactly. Right.
Now, moving from the specific chemical type to how they're actually used the application outlook, the report lists chemical intermediates, solvents, preservatives, antioxidants, and others. Which application area is the largest?
Well, no real surprise here. The largest share belongs to chemical intermediates.
Right, that's their main job description.
Pretty much. They're indispensable for synthesizing that huge array of end products we've been talking about: resins, agrochemicals, medicines, specialty chemicals, antioxidants, vitamin E. They are the necessary step in the chemical process for so many things.
Okay. And which application segment is expanding the fastest?
The report identifies solvents as the rapidly expanding segment.
Solvents. Why?
Well, cresols are used as industrial solvents because of their particular solubility and reactivity properties. This makes them valuable in the chemical, pharmaceutical, and polymer industries.
For what kinds of things?
They're needed for making resins, dyes, coatings, and also degreasers. The report also notes their use in applications like electronics manufacturing, automotive adhesives and coatings, and even in some pharmaceutical drug formulations and disinfectants. So a growing need across several sectors.
Okay, let's zoom back out again and look at the bigger forces affecting this whole market. What's pushing it forward and what's potentially holding it back? What are the key dynamics according to the report?
Right, so on the driver side, the report clearly points to the expanding agrochemical industry. That's a big one.
Makes sense. Demand for insecticides, herbicides, fungicides directly translates into demand for the cresols used to make them?
Precisely. And another massive driver is the growing use in the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, you mentioned disinfectants, antiseptics.
And as those critical intermediates for things like antibiotics, analgesics, and skincare products, and the report notes this demand got a significant boost post-pandemic, which isn't surprising.
No, not at all.
And sort of tied into that is the overall surging usage of industrial cleaners and disinfectants across numerous sectors: hospitals, factories, public spaces, you name it.
Okay, so strong demand drivers. Now for the challenges, the restraints. What's working against this growth?
A major one highlighted is the increasing availability and adoption of substitute chemicals.
Ah, alternatives.
Yeah. Things like certain phenol derivatives or, interestingly, bio-based solvents are becoming more viable alternatives, often because they offer potentially reduced toxicity or a lower environmental impact compared to traditional cresols.
And that ties directly into the other big restraint mentioned, regulations, right?
Exactly. Cresols face scrutiny because, well, they are classified as dangerous and linked to certain health risks, potential long-term health issues, skin irritation, respiratory problems. So regulatory bodies around the world are imposing stricter rules on their production, handling, and use.
So you have these strong drivers pulling the market forward, especially in key industries in developing regions. But you also have these significant restraints pushing back, driven by safety concerns and the rise of alternatives.
It's a classic push-pull dynamic.
It sounds like manufacturers are walking a bit of a tightrope then. How do you keep up with demand from these booming sectors while dealing with regulatory pressure and competition from substitutes? Does the report offer any insight into how the industry is navigating this?
Well, that tension is actually driving some of the key trends the report highlights.
Okay, like what?
One major trend is the growing demand for high-purity cresols. We touched on this with Turkey earlier.
Right.
This is especially true in those sensitive industries like electronics, specialty chemicals, and pharmaceuticals, where inconsistent purity just isn't an option. They need precise, reliable inputs. So it's a move towards quality assurance.
That makes sense. And the second major trend seems directly linked to the restraints we just discussed, the rising demand for bio-based cresols.
Exactly. Since traditional cresols are derived from fossil fuels like coal tar and petroleum, bio-based options, made from renewable resources, are seen as a potential path towards sustainability.
And potentially offering lower toxicity and a reduced environmental footprint.
That's the hope and the goal. The report notes that both governments and industry are increasing investment in green chemicals, which is accelerating the R&D and hopefully the commercialization of these bio-based alternatives.
So even as the traditional market grows steadily, there's this underlying shift happening within it towards cleaner, potentially safer options. That's a really important trend to watch.
Absolutely fundamental.
The report also gives us a quick glimpse into the competitive landscape. Who are some of the big players operating in this cresol space?
Yeah, the source lists a number of key companies. Names that pop up include Lanxess AG, Atul Ltd, Mitsui Chemicals Inc., Sasol Ltd, and Sabic, among others. A mix of global chemical players.
And it seems their strategies kind of reflect the dynamics we just discussed. Things like investing in bio-based cresols, expanding capacity, forming strategic alliances.
Yes, exactly. The report provides a couple of examples of recent activity to illustrate this. It mentions that Lanxess acquired IFF's microbial control business,
Okay.
which is a move that would strengthen its market presence, particularly in the U.S. disinfectant and preservative space, likely related to cresols.
And it also noted something about Sasol.
Right, that Sasol sold its sodium cyanide business to a company called Droslovka Holding. The source frames this as part of Sasol's broader strategy of divesting certain assets, and it also marked Droslovka's first big investment in Africa. So you see companies actively reshaping their portfolios within or adjacent to this chemical space.
Got it. And just to note, the report mentions that factors outside the immediate industry, like the impact of what the report calls Trump's tariff war, were considered within the scope of its market analysis. We're just reporting that as stated in the source material.
Right, as part of the context they analyzed.
Wow, okay. That was quite a journey into the world of Cresols. It really is amazing how these chemical building blocks, ones we rarely think about, underpin so many different industries. We've really unpacked quite a bit from this market report.
We definitely have. We looked at the overall market size, closing in on $1 billion now, expected to grow steadily past that.
We pinpointed where the action is happening. North America currently leads in size, but the future growth engine is undeniably APAC, driven by industrialization in key sectors like pharma and agriculture. That 5.9% CAGR is telling.
We zeroed in on the components. Paracresol is the workhorse, meta-cresol is the rising star in terms of growth, and chemical intermediates and solvents are where the main demand lies in terms of application.
And we dissected those key market dynamics.
hmm
The powerful pull from growing industries like agrochemicals and pharma, contrasted with the pushback from regulations and the emergence of substitute chemicals.
Which directly leads into those clear trends. The report highlights the demand for higher purity, especially in tech and pharma, and perhaps most significantly, that accelerating shift towards bio-based alternatives driven by sustainability concerns.
Right.
So thinking about all of this, the essential role Cresols play across incredibly diverse parts of our economy, showing up in everything from tires to electronics components to agriculture and health products.
But also acknowledging the very real health risks and environmental concerns tied to traditional production methods.
How will that tension, that push and pull between relying on these established necessary building blocks and the growing demand for bio-based, potentially less toxic, more sustainable options, how will that really reshape this market over the next decade?
And maybe more importantly for you listening, what could that fundamental strategic shift mean for the products you encounter and rely on every single day? Something to chew on.